My name is Kelly Johnson, and welcome to Women at Iowa, a place where the University of Iowa community can come together and take pride in the accomplishments of the women who call it home. Our guest today is the program coordinator for Iowa New Leadership, an initiative that works together to recruit and cultivate new leaders for Iowa and the nation. So please help me in welcoming Kelly Thornburg. Kelly, it's great to have you on.
Thanks, Kelly. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So can you tell our audience a little bit more about what New Leadership is, what it strives to do, what it stands for?
Definitely. Iowa New Leadership is a relatively new program at the University of Iowa, and we have just wrapped up our second year, so our second institute, which is the sort of meat and potatoes of the program in a lot of ways. That means that we take 6 days and we invite 30 undergraduate women from across the state of Iowa, typically about half from the University of Iowa, to sort of honor our home institution. And then we invite recruits from different schools, undergraduates that either come from 2 or 4-year institutions across the state. So it's an intensive week, 6 days of training where we really kind of invite the women to think about what they really need to develop inside of themselves, so far as skills, so far as fundraising, networking, strategic communication, really kind of considering if they want to run for office, and we're really hoping that they do, that what do they need to be successful? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses or sort of challenges and the things that they're going to need to find in a team of people who are going to help them support their campaign if they choose to engage in one. So it's a pretty hardcore week, but it's a lot of fun, and we invite a lot of women leaders from all over the state to come and help with the training. So the participants are not only able to practice their skills, but they're also able to build relationships with women who are going to be able to mentor them and to support them, and also collaborate with them in initiatives across the state, whether that's on kind of a nonprofit level or kind of running for office or working on campaigns or supporting different things.
So why do you think Iowa needs a program like New Leadership?
Well, just on a purely sort of factual level, Iowa is one of only 2 states in the nation who have not elected a woman either into the governor's office or to Congress.
Really?
The other state is Mississippi, and I think in general a lot of people are a little shocked by that because Iowa is really progressive and really supportive of women in a lot of other contexts. But when it comes to elected office, we're definitely not electing people who are representing really the broad base of people who live and work and serve Iowa. So the program is really intended to be kind of part of a solution to sort of remedy that issue. Certainly because we're starting with undergraduate students, we're starting with them as early in their career as possible. So the results are not necessarily going to be that we're going to get a student into the governor's office and, in the next couple of years, certainly. But what we're hoping to do is help her build her skill set, build connections and relationships, and to be able to really help her plan a trajectory that will eventually, hopefully, lead to being in one of those offices.
I like that idea of a trajectory. So with that, do you follow the women that you have in New Leadership? Do you keep in contact with them? Or is there, granted you're in your second year, but do you have kind of an idea for what to do with those women 5 years out of the program, 10 years out? How do you keep in contact with the people in the program?
Well, we have the luxury of being part of a larger group of New Leadership programs. So initially, the program was established at Rutgers at the Center for American Women in Politics. And so they started New Leadership, and they've been doing it for a little over, I think, 16 years.
Wow.
And so we can look to them for examples of how to sort of maintain relationships with our alumni. Also, we really tap into their research base because they track, as well as many other programs in the country, their alumni's progress and stay in touch with them. And we've really been able to sort of just take on those practices and start with them in our first year. So we do research with our participants to make sure that we are able to tell kind of where they start. So are they thinking about running for office? Are they not? Has it ever crossed their mind? Do they even pay attention to politics? Why did they come to the program? So we have them fill out a pre and a post survey after the institute, and then we ask them the same questions 6 months down the road and then a year, and we'll continue to do that. And of course, We keep informal contact with our alumni. We have been able to support them in the pursuit of scholarships and fellowships and professional opportunities already. Cool. And so that's something that we really look to be a key piece. This is not just a week that we're spending with them. This is a long-term relationship we're building, because basically I kind of see it as it's really important that we look at the network that we're building for women in Iowa. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily have the same sort of, I kind of think of it as a good old girls network, with a little bit different spin. You know, we don't want to be exclusionary. We want to include as many people and as many perspectives as possible, but it's still necessary for us to build a network, and that's what we're trying to do.
What kind of women do you look for to be a part of the program? Do you have kind of a particular type at all?
Well, certainly we definitely open the program up. Anybody can apply. Mm-hmm. A lot of institutions, particularly undergraduate institutions outside of the University of Iowa, nominate students, so they have their own process that kind of happens on their campuses. Gotcha. But we really want a mix. We want students who it has crossed their mind. Mm-hmm. Hey, you know, maybe I've run for student government office. Maybe I have served on a local commission or served as like a student liaison in community government, so city council or some sort of board or commission. We definitely have students that apply who have had more experience like that, and they come into the program and they're able to sort of set a tone in a lot of ways. Right. But we also really look for women who, faculty and administrators and staff, student worker, you know, people who work with students on campus and kind of see them in their daily lives. We want them to be able to nominate and identify women who wouldn't necessarily nominate themselves. So a quieter leader who clearly sets the tone in the classroom or in her student organization or whatever it is that she's doing in the community and says, okay, she's got something, and she may not see it in herself yet, but she's got something that the rest of the world needs to be a little bit stronger, and she needs to be able to hone that. So we want a balance of those kinds of women.
What do you think is one of the biggest issues with women's leadership? What do you think women need to be taught in new leadership? Kind of an all-encompassing kind of, that all across the board, one main thing that no matter where they come from in a different background, women seem to struggle with when it comes to approaching leadership positions.
Well, I think first and foremost, and this kind of goes back to the nominating process, or sort of that identification of women who don't necessarily see themselves as leaders, is that women, for I think a lot of different reasons, and these reasons have really been explored by researchers and certainly people who are looking to sort of create some momentum in this area in the country, but women don't tend to think about running for office themselves. Studies have shown that it's really something they'll do if someone comes to them and says, you know, Kelly, I think you should run for office. Have you ever thought about that? Or I think you would be great at this. Why don't you do it? And women, when that happens, will think, oh, well, maybe I should. But they don't tend to typically self-identify. Yeah. So that's something that we really want the program. For a lot of people, that's part of the program. That's part of their experience, is being tapped by staff or faculty or people who know them on campus.
Being told you can
do it. You can do this. And that's a really big difference for women. I think particularly, and I think this is more so even for Midwesterners, women are taught that it's better to be kind of a worker bee. Like, it's good to be a hard worker who's humble and kind and generous, and that you don't want to kind of get your ego involved, because we typically associate ego with politics, correct?
Right.
So I think that that's a really big thing, is that we want women to not only see themselves as potential leaders, but we also want them to know that it's okay to say, I'm smart enough and I have enough expertise to do this. That's a really huge thing for women. And I think that there is a transitional period that it takes for people to sort of practice being able to do that. Practice being able to say, I could totally run for office, or I know what I'm talking about, and I think I could do it better than you could, which is part of running for office and making the decision to sort of open your life up to that kind of experience.
I gotcha. What do you think is the one main thing that out of this program, alongside the skill sets and the knowledge that the girls will learn, what is kind of the one final message that they're left with, the one thing that they can benefit the most from?
I think something that we really try to encourage is not to be afraid I think that there are lots of things that I think anybody considering running for office, but I think in particular women, that you're going to fail. You're going to fall on your face or lose off. You're going to lose races. You're going to pick up the phone and ask somebody for money, and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to
It's
keep
terrifying.
doing. Yeah, exactly. You have to be able to keep doing that, even though you know, a good percentage of the time it's just not going to work, and that's not about you, but it's just a part of the process. And that if you really want something and you really think you can do some good, then you just have to kind of know that that's part of the package. Failure is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a learning experience. It's a chance to kind of hone your skills and sort of refine what you're doing and what your goals are. And I think that that's a really hard message for particularly this generation of women who I think everybody's so busy and so committed and talented in so many ways. And I really feel like people have an expectation that you're supposed to be sort of a Renaissance woman. You're supposed to be good at everything that you do. And really, the way that campaigns work and elections work is you have to be good at being a candidate, and then you have to let other people be good at other things to help you. Yeah. And I think that that's also a piece of that understanding, that you don't have to be good at every single thing that you do. You just have to know what you're good at and what you need help with.
I love that term, Renaissance women, that we don't have to be that kind of person.
Definitely. I think it's a lot of pressure for people, and I think we really want to help them step back and say, you don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
So, because that's not going to get you anywhere. In fact, it's just going to kind of feed that fear about running in the first place.
And failing.
Yep. So,
what kind of dynamic is it like getting all these women together to be a part of this program who want to strive to be leaders, who want to be the next president, who want to be the next governor? What is that like?
Well, for me, it's a huge luxury. I mean, I think it's really exciting. I am 32, so sort of am in the middle of kind of the women that I work with primarily. Certainly we have non-traditional students as a part of the program as well, but typically our age group is, about 19 to 22. And then most of our presenters are usually starting at about 32 up to, in 70s. We've had certainly a wide range of generations represented. But it's a really amazing thing to see how excited the participants are to be a part of it, even though in a lot of ways I think they don't even totally understand what they're getting into. But the presenters and the women that we invite to be a part of the week as mentors and teachers are so excited about the program. They're like tripping over themselves trying to find a way to be a part of it and to help us. And I think that there's so much in the media and in kind of just our culture in general that says that women don't want to help each other. And I think every moment that I have inside of the work that I do with this program kind of really disproves that.
Transcending the whole mean girls idea.
Yeah. So, and I think that there's lots of discussion, particularly lately, inside of feminism and inside of kind of our evolving women's movement that has a lot of tension between the generations. And I think that this program is a really great opportunity for us to take a look at those and see what's really happening and what's really just kind of mythology. And what I'm finding is that there's a lot of reciprocity between the generations, and that there's a lot more collaboration and understanding than is really kind of acknowledged.
I've never taken time to really think about that and think about the intergenerational relationship. So when you have these young girls who come to be a part of the program, these undergraduate women, you said just a minute ago that they didn't know what they were getting into.
Often.
What is their schedule on it's 6 weeks of intense workshopping. How does it? Tell me what a typical day would be as a part of the program.
Sure. Well, typically we start about 9 and we go until about 9 or 10 at night. Wow. So the first 3 days of the program typically are very much about skill building. And so each session builds on the next. And so they're moving from intense, sort of challenging. A lot of people are not super comfortable with public speaking, or the idea of fundraising is just completely horrifying to them. I think for most of us, again, particularly Midwesterners, I don't think we're very keen on asking people for things, right? So there's a lot of pressure to really kind of push yourself, and I think in general, one of out of the programs that exist in the country so far as new leadership goes, our curriculum is really rigorous, much more so than I think a lot of programs. And we do that on purpose because if students are going to come to the program and it is free for them, we want to make sure that every dollar that we raise and every student that we invite is being put to good use and that they're getting the most that they possibly can out of that 6 days. If they're going to commit 6 days of their summer, which for a lot of students is a huge sacrifice, they give up work, they give up opportunity elsewhere, they give up, they have to find childcare and put off family vacations and all sorts of things in order to participate.
Big commitment.
And we want them to get as much out of it as possible. And sometimes I think people are like, oh, it's just too much. but I think at the end of the week, they're like, wow, I had no idea. I had no idea it was going to be this.
Yeah.
So,
are you able to connect with the other new leadership programs across the country to kind of talk about what's worked, what's not worked? Do you have conventions at all to talk with the other leaders of the programs?
There are meetings. And I am relatively new to the position. I just accepted my position in October of 2008. So while I've been working on the program, I was as a grad student kind of peripherally. I just kind of came into the full-time role recently. So I've not been able to attend one, but we definitely have a lot of communication between the other women who run the programs across the country. And there's a lot of good feedback and being able to learn from other people's mistakes and kind of look at what programming is happening elsewhere and what might work here and what might not. So it's a great resource.
So you just said that this is your first year as coordinator, and so you started with as a grad student working on work for the new leadership program. What attracted you to it?
Well, it's funny. One of my friends was doing one of her social work practicums at the Women's Resource and Action Center, which is where the program is housed, and she came to class one day and she's like, Kelly, you have to work on this. It's like every single thing that you care most about in life sort of crammed into one program. And I love politics, and I came back to Iowa specifically because I think that it's such an interesting political environment, and I think that it has so much potential and is so interesting, and it plays a really vital role in the country's conversation as a whole.
Yeah.
And so I was really excited to be able to sort of pair education with kind of the legislative piece that we do, because we really engage the students who participate in the week in a larger conversation about an issue. So for this year, it was the wage gap here in Iowa. Last year, we had a really good conversation about how we're addressing human trafficking through legislation. So that's something that's really fascinating for me. I get to do that research. I get to, sort of geek out and really get into a topic and really kind of invite the students to join me in that process, which is really fun for me. And also, I think it's really amazing, and if I could just make a living doing this forever, I totally would, is being able to connect the generations of women who are here in Iowa doing amazing work, trying to sort of make their voice heard and get other people's voices heard. Like being able to connect everybody and kind of build that network is like the coolest thing I could ever do. So it was a huge luxury just to be able to know that the program existed and have the kind of good timing to kind of sign on as a project assistant.
And you mentioned bringing in these women of different generations to come and talk to the students. I understand you had a pretty large keynote figure come and speak at New Leadership this year. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Definitely. We had the luxury, my first choice, and immediately when my director said, who do you want to come this year and be the keynote, I said Bonnie Campbell, hands down. There's no question for me. And that was really because I think that Bonnie has been such an incredible example of a woman who's really reached out to all sectors. I mean, she's worked on the federal level. She clearly was our former attorney general here in Iowa. She ran for governor here in Iowa and really came close to winning and she ran a great campaign and really kind of made progress for women in Iowa to get us a little bit closer to have that happen. And she's also done a lot of really incredible work for women overseas and internationally so far as human rights work with women's issues and violence against women in particular. She has been an incredible advocate. And I really thought she's also incredibly loyal to Iowa. She's an incredibly successful person. She's a lawyer. She could live anywhere, right? She could definitely be in D.C. or New York and probably have in some ways different and more, I don't know, sort of glamorous opportunities.
Yeah.
But she's really chosen Iowa as her home, and I really think that she's the perfect example of what you could do when you decide to be a public advocate. So
yeah. And I believe last year you had the lieutenant governor, correct?
Sally Petersen, absolutely.
What did she kind of bring to that year of your inaugural year of students?
Well, the former lieutenant governor has a really incredible background as well, and she has had a lot of experience in the private sector, which I think is a great example for the participants to see that even if you don't start out thinking, okay, I'm going to be a public servant, that a lot of the time, again, that trajectory that you end up following ends up being something that you don't expect. So Sally Petersen worked in the private sector. She realized, wait a second, like I need to be involved in my community in a different way in addition to the work that I'm doing in that sector. And she was really heavily involved with the Democratic Party and did a lot of really substantial work, and then eventually was able to sign on and help Governor Vilsack, do the work that he really wanted to do. And now she's serving as an advocate for families and individuals with autism. And so she's really, again, a great example of a spectrum of different ways that you can be a public servant and really be effective while still staying true to what really matters to you.
Yeah. Any ideas for who you want in the next couple of years for keynote speakers?
I think I probably shouldn't give away my secrets, but I definitely have some, and I'm excited to be able to. We've already started to dig in and plan next year's institute.
Wow, already?
Yeah, no, we have to get started right away. People always ask me, like, so what else do you do besides plan new leadership? And it's a substantial effort to bring together as many women as you can and to really build that curriculum in a way that's
especially when
solid.
You pick a different theme to focus on, a different issue.
Definitely.
That takes a lot of research.
Yeah.
These keynote speakers, I understand that they're open to the public, aren't they?
Absolutely. A really, really important piece of Iowa New Leadership is being able to say to our community members who are incredibly supportive of the program, both financially and with their sort of word of mouth and attendance and kind of general enthusiasm. So it's important for us to make sure that we include them in the conversation about where women's leadership is going in our state and in our country. And so always during the week of New Leadership and then throughout the year as we do sort of supplemental events, we make sure that the public is invited. So this year we were able to do a screening of a documentary film called What's Your Point, Honey?, which was directed by Amy Sewell, who also did Mad Hot Ballroom. She's a really great woman. She's a fantastic advocate. And she came to campus and we had a screening at the Bijou and with a Q&A afterwards that we really purposefully invited a lot of younger women, so women kind of in grade school and junior high, to come and see that there were women considering running for president and to kind of engage in that conversation. And so a lot of them came with their moms and aunts and friends, and it was really awesome. So, and then we also, of course, have the keynote reception. And so we invited the public to join us to hear Bonnie's remarks and to meet the participants and to also meet some of the other people who are supporting the program.
I think it's really important because I think your program in some way is kind of a gift to Iowa in general to be able to provide them with people on the trajectory to be new leaders.
Absolutely. It's a really important piece for us to look at it. And when we chose New Leadership as the program that we wanted to use to foster these students, we really wanted to make sure that it wasn't just about University of Iowa students. Certainly this is our home and this is where we're based and, in a lot of ways where our heart is, but also it's so important to sort of invest in Iowa as a whole. And it's a great way for the University of Iowa to do that and to really kind of say, it's not just about us. It's about this larger question of who is representing us. Is it truly equal? It's not equal representation. So how do we get it there? So it's a really great thing that the University of Iowa is doing.
Yeah. How do you see new leadership changing in the next couple of years? I assume you'll be sticking around to coordinate for a little bit yet?
If they'll have me, certainly. So far as changes go, I think that we're looking at a couple different things. Certainly the Women's Resource and Action Center has a long history with social justice, and we're really looking at how we can incorporate that into the week more thoroughly, and to also make sure that we really honor the nonpartisan nature of the the week as well,
Yeah.
because it's not about a certain value set by any means. Really what we want to do is we want to train any woman who wants to run for office and wants to sort of make this choice and go down that path, no matter what party she's from, or if that's not something that's important to her, whatever her situation is or her beliefs are, we want to support her in that process.
Yeah.
And so we've been doing a lot of outreach, in particular with Republican women, which, because of the political sort of history of the center, is something we need to be purposeful about, and we're very committed to that. And this year we were really able to expand our relationships, and we'll definitely continue to do so. But also, it's really important for us to make sure that this opportunity is available to women of color, to single moms, to people who don't necessarily have the resources to tap into this kind of community. And when we say we want to build that good old girls network, we want to make sure, unlike the good old boys network and a lot of other sort of kind of who you know sort of places and relationships, we want to be able to extend that to anyone who really wants to be a part of it. So that's something in recruitment and in programming and such that we'll really be focusing on in the next couple of years.
Gotcha. Very cool. Now, you are not from Iowa originally.
I'm not, no.
And I believe Washington, you said?
Yep, Auburn, Washington. Yep.
So if there's no Iowa New Leadership Program there, so how did you get kind of the same skill set as New Leadership offers to the women here?
Well, I had an unusual opportunity. I went to Cornell College just down the road in Mount Vernon for my undergraduate degree. And while I was at Cornell, I won a Truman Scholarship. So the Truman Scholarship is a national scholarship, sort of like the Rhodes or the Marshall, and it specifically targets people who are interested in going into public service. So it's a national scholarship that chooses students from each state. And I was able, I won, miraculously sometimes it seems, and was able to really go through a training that's very similar to Iowa New Leadership during that program, and was able to kind of see how potent of an experience that was. And also something that was really important for me is I learned that there are a gazillion different ways to be smart and to be a good advocate for people, that I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be a particular kind of person who's doing a particular kind of work and following a very specific path. And being a part of the Truman community really showed me that there are really so many different ways to be contributing to your communities in a really substantial way, in a purposeful way, but that don't look the same. And that's something that I really try to bring to New Leadership in particular. But I was really lucky to have that experience and be a part of the community. It's been really influential in my life.
Yeah.
So,
are we going to see you on a ballot anytime soon?
Well, it's definitely part of how I kind of consider my life, you know. I mean, and I think that that's a piece of certainly the program itself, but being a public servant versus, you know, being just a volunteer, kind of seeing yourself in a very purposeful way.
Yeah.
You kind of have to plan your life in some ways to kind of make sure you can do that, and that you're on the up and up and paying attention ethically and politically and all that stuff. So I certainly would love to run for office if the opportunity presents itself. It's, as anybody would know, it's kind of a magical combination of things that have to happen. I really love living in Iowa, and I'm committed to staying here. And I really love the community that I live here in Iowa City. But we have great public servants here, you know, and I'm not interested in kind of booting them out or trying to run against them. I really am excited to support them and be a part of their sort of legacies. But, you know, if the opportunity were to come up, it's something that I have thought a lot about and am really interested in, so.
What kind of office do you think? Do you think it would be local as in city, or state, federal, working, being one of the first women in Congress, maybe? What really seems to speak to you?
Well, I really think in a lot of ways my initial instinct to come back to Iowa is kind of a big motivator for me when I think about running for office. And I really think that while I would not rule out more of a local office like city council or the board of supervisors, I do think that the state house is something that is really attractive to me just because it's a really broad range of issues. You also get to represent a broader spectrum of constituents, which is really appealing to me. And I think that kind of public service is what I'm most interested in. But you never know what'll happen. So,
what kind of advice do you have for a young woman, let's say undergrad or graduating from undergrad, who wants to get involved in politics? What would you tell them?
Well, first and foremost, I would say don't wait for someone else to invite you. I know that, certainly we've talked about that that's kind of the way it happens a lot of the time. But I really think that the earlier you start and the more that you practice being comfortable with your own ambition and your own worth as a public advocate, the sooner you can be helpful and really make a solid contribution to your community and to the work that you're most interested in. But I also think that one of the best ways to do that is to run for office inside of the organizations that you're a part of. So if you're in college, running for student senate or running for a spot on the Council on the Status of Women, being a part of your community in a way that is contributing, and it allows you to get experience in a very specific way that is really going to serve you down the road. But also, it also introduces you to people who know that you're interested in that kind of thing. One of the things that's really been happening a lot lately here in the state of Iowa is we just recently passed a piece of legislation that requires gender parity on boards and commissions at all levels in the state. So on the local level, the state level, and certainly the county level. And that's a great thing for young women and men in our state because it gives them an open opportunity to say, okay, I'm a young person, I'm interested in these things, and there are a bazillion commissions and boards, so anything that you're interested in is more than likely represented. And it's a great way for you to get experience. And it's kind of a learn-on-the-job sort of situation in a lot of the time with boards and commissions. So you don't have to be an expert coming in. You can acquire that knowledge as you go and be mentored by other people on the board. And I would really recommend that all young people in general, kind of consider that as an option for sort of their contribution to their community. So,
what about in terms of supporting other women for office? How will, let's say there's somebody who is very interested in having a woman being on city council or a woman being in Congress, but they're not looking to run themselves. How can they still support other women to hold these positions?
The big thing is talk to them. Say, Kelly, I think you should run for office. What are you doing about it? I think that we are an incredible resource to each other. And we're a resource that a lot of the time we just don't see. And I think that if you know some woman who is really, because of her experience with, inside of healthcare or with her children in their school system or as a student have had a really potent experience that you can see them sort of turning into an advocate and really getting hungry for change or to do something about a problem that they're thinking about or being affected by, the greatest thing that you can do is say, you can do this. You can run for office, or you can get on the school board or, on student government and do something about this. Have you thought about that? And that's what needs to happen.
So being a woman to tap another woman and say.
Absolutely.
And even for men too,
Absolutely.
To encourage. Very interesting.
Definitely.
So throughout this process, I don't know if you've had much time to reflect yourself. So thinking back to when you were 20-some years old, who did you look up to? Which women leaders did you really find shaped this path that you've taken?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, I didn't really look at female leaders per se. I think I had a really potent experience growing up with my own mother. She was a single mom, and she struggled with a lot of physical sort of disabilities and then also a lot of mental illness over the course of her life, as a lot of women in my family have. And so watching them go through that experience and try to negotiate systems and having people completely be so incredibly disrespectful of their experience and of their worth as people was probably the biggest motivator that kind of got me moving, I guess. And so while my mom is not an elected official, certainly I think that watching her and growing up, seeing what her life was like and how hard it was, in a lot of ways it just didn't need to be. That was probably the most influential. But I really think in a lot of ways, certainly Hillary Clinton was a really a big influence for me. I mean, I grew up certainly during the Clinton era, and that's when I really started to pay attention to politics. And I had the opportunity when I was working in D.C. to meet her on a number of occasions, and really was able to connect with her in a very solid way that left a really lasting impression on me, and really disproved all of the sort of mythology about her. And being able to see a woman who has such an interesting and complex relationship with the media and reputation, and to see and to be able to really connect with her in a way that everybody said you wouldn't be able to connect with her, really showed me that we need to not pay as much attention about all the assumptions that people are making about women and the work that they're doing on a governmental level.
Do you think that's also kind of a hindrance with not only Hillary Clinton running for president, there is Sarah Palin who ran for vice president. There seems to be a lot of fire in the media towards women.
Sure.
Is that a detriment, do you think? In Iowa, do we still see that?
I think we see it everywhere. It's not. It's definitely not an obstacle that we've gotten past. And a lot of people ask us why we focus the program on undergraduate women in particular, because certainly we want advocates from every place and every kind of population to be able to have a voice in government. But I think a lot of it is really we still have to think about a lot of things that men who decide to run don't have to think about. We have stricter rules and sort of a more rigid path that we have to follow in order to be acceptable for people as candidates and certainly as elected officials. And I think that's a special set of circumstances to negotiate. And the more support we have in kind of understanding those and seeing them and then deciding what parts of ourselves make sense with those parameters and maybe what parts don't. That's a big thing, and that's a conversation we really tried to have with the participants.
That's great. So do you have parts in the new leadership program to address that, the view of women in politics?
Absolutely. We have a very specific conversation about personal presentation, and that's something that I bet men's leadership does not have. But it's a really key thing to kind of know what other people's expectations of you are in that sort of context, and what you're willing to compromise about yourself, like what's okay for you and what's not, and are there going to be repercussions about that? So it's a conversation that we have with elected officials and with other public servants. So
with your experience then in working with DC and meeting these top federal governmental officials, how were you able to take some of those experiences and apply it to a new leadership program and apply it to people who are thinking of going to run for Congress or going to run for maybe even the president position someday?
Sure.
What were you able to kind of bring from those DC experiences?
Well, I think that my experience in DC, and I worked for the USDA, I've worked for nonprofits, I've certainly worked on a good handful of campaigns in a lot of different places. And I think that what I learned mostly from those experiences are really that you can't do it alone. And I think that that's something that really people get really fixated on, like that we're such a kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps sort of culture, and we really think if I'm going to do this, I'm going to run for office, I have to know how to do every single thing myself and do it well. And what I really learned working in DC in particular is that that's not true. You have people who are good at very specific things to help you be good at being a candidate. And that's something that, we want people to be involved in politics who are not necessarily like political junkies, right? Because we want people who are really passionate about a specific experience, or who know a lot about autism, or sort of midwifery, or whatever it is that they're really passionate about. We want those people to sort of emerge from like everyday people, and so you have to have a group of people who can be more sort of aware of and pay more attention to the kind of rules that you have to follow or the experience that you have to have. And I think a lot of people don't get that. So we really try to say, again, going back to the Renaissance women thing, you don't have to know it all. You really just have to be able to ask for help.
So in a way, new leadership kind of is that help, is
Absolutely.
that support. They
Definitely.
have links to all these women who are across Iowa being involved as public servants and governmental officials.
Exactly. So really, part of the benefit of the Good Old Boys Network all this time is that you can learn from other people's experiences, that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, or you don't have to do it alone. And so we are absolutely excited about the fact that we're able to create a network of both the young women who are their peers, so the other people who are at the Institute with them. They have an enormous amount of experience and perspective that you can tap into, in addition to, of course, the women who are a little bit more experienced and sort of serve more as a mentor.
Do you think that we'll see somebody in the position of either Congress or governor from Iowa in the next 5-10 years?
I absolutely think that we will. I think that as a state, we're really looking at who we're electing and why, and I think that you can tell in some of the work that we've been doing in comparison to other states, we certainly are making strides in ways that other people are not, and I think that we're just going to continue to do that, and I'm really looking forward to the program being a piece of that and to being able to contribute to it myself. So,
now I like to leave the interview with some notes for undergraduate women, other women around the community. One thing that I love to ask each guest is to recommend a book or a piece of literature that you think emphasizes your view on these issues, or that you think really will help a woman on her own personal journey, or something even that's just impacted your life that you think anybody in the audience could really benefit from.
Sure. I think in terms of thinking about how complex life is, particularly being in the public eye, a book that was really had a really serious impact on me was Personal History by Katherine Graham. Katherine Graham, of course, ran the Washington Post for many, many years and was a very public, very permanent figure in Washington, D.C., and elsewhere in the East Coast. And she was an incredibly influential woman, but she never thought she would be. And she had a real life, like a really complex, complicated, hard in a lot of ways, less so in others, kind of life that she was willing to be really open about. She didn't gloss over or try to make it seem like she had all the answers or knew exactly what she was doing. She was really open about the process and the struggles that she went through in order to get to be the incredibly successful and articulate and amazing advocate that she was. And even though she worked in the private sector, she did amazing work for women in our country, for journalism and the integrity of that whole system in and of itself. And it was really shaping for me. And I think that when we go back to that idea of taking the pressure off of ourselves to be Renaissance women, I think that she's a great example of that.
Great. And then lastly, for people who want to, because I understand that you get you fundraise for all of your funds, correct, for the program?
Absolutely. We do have a portion of support that comes from the University of Iowa, but due to budget constraints and, everybody's kind of struggling on that front, we do fundraise most of the money for the program, and it costs about $3,000 per student, and we accept 30 students. So it's a substantial amount of money to raise.
So how could people either support you guys financially or get involved in the program and be a part of in the Institute? How do you recommend somebody go about to being involved in new leadership?
Well, so far as donations go, and sometimes that's the easiest way for people to be a part of something, and that's a totally okay thing. I mean, people are so busy and there's so much going on in people's lives all the time that in some ways that's the perfect match. And certainly those donations can be made very easily to the Women's Resource and Action Center through the University of Iowa Foundation. That's how we work, and they work with us really, really collaboratively on that. Also, another way to support the program is through Iowa Shares. The Women's Resource and Action Center belongs to Iowa Shares as a workplace giving option. So it's similar to United Way. You designate monthly sort of donations that are going to be funneled through Iowa Shares, and we get, I believe it's 86 cents out of every dollar. So it's really low overhead for workplace giving, and it's a really effective way to channel money on a consistent basis into the program and into the center. So far as getting involved, I really think that this year we're going to be exploring a number of different options about doing house parties to not only fundraise, but to create awareness in the community about women's leadership and how it's evolving and a lot of the questions that are going on, which I think is really something people are craving and are hungry for. I think coming out of the election, the most recent presidential election, with Hillary Clinton and the entire conversation that surrounded her, as well as Sarah Palin and sort of what's evolving with her at this point. There are lots of people having a lot of conversation that I think that we'd really like to be a part of, and that we could contribute to that. And so I think a house party is a great way to sort of help raise awareness about the issues itself, while also kind of helping us garner support.
So for anybody who's watching the show who's interested in being a part of New Leadership for next year, part of the Institute, should they go to the Women's Resource and Action Center? What's the best way for them to apply? Or when is that whole application period to be a part of the Institute?
Well, to answer your first question, if you're a community supporter and you are interested in being a part of New Leadership, either financially or as a community member, we definitely, our website is a great resource. We do have the community events during the Institute every year, and we really invite as many people as possible to be a part of those. And we'll certainly be posting that information. But we also will open up our application. I believe the application will be available October 1st. We're going to open up the application window earlier this year in order to allow, because students are so busy, it's so hard to plan now. So we really want to be able to give them more room for that. So the application will be on our website. You do not have to be nominated to apply, but faculty, professors, anybody on campus who know someone who they think, oh my God, this program sounds perfect for them. They have to do this. They can either just get in touch with me directly, or they can go on the website and use the nomination form. So students themselves can apply directly through the website, and then faculty and staff can certainly nominate as well.
Great. Well, wonderful. And I'm hoping that if there's any last things that you want somebody else to know about the program, that you want the University of Iowa community to the program, feel free to impart that. Hope I didn't gloss over anything that you
I think you did a great job. It's very comprehensive. I think in general, it's really important for people to know that this is a nonpartisan effort, and that this is something that we hope will be a long-term investment in Iowa, and that certainly there are individuals that we're cultivating, but it's more of a collective experience in a lot of ways, and that we really hope that this will make a lasting impact on the relationship that women have with Iowa and with the nation, and that we'll be able to get more people involved in the legislative process and to be able to have their voice heard. And that includes people of color, people of differing ability, people who are coming from different class backgrounds. There's so much potential in just inviting sort of the not the usual suspects to the table. And that's really, if you're excited about that and you want this to continue happening, we definitely are glad to have your support and invite any contribution you might make. So
wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I think
thank you.
Very, very worthwhile program, not just for the University of Iowa community, but for Iowa community as a whole.
Definitely.
So thank you for coming to share that story. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thank you guys for tuning in as well. And please check out more shows of Women at Iowa.